Lena Thompson's rise to fame was as swift as it was spectacular. A college student from a small town in Nebraska, she quickly captivated the internet with her posts about a glamorous lifestyle filled with luxury cars, private jets, and extravagant vacations. Her Instagram was a carefully curated masterpiece, with every photo meticulously staged to project the perfect life, one of wealth, power, and influence. For a while, no one questioned it. But Lena wasn't just showing off her idealized reality. She was also building a persona, a character who seemed too good to be true. And as it turned out, she wasn't true at all. The life she presented wasn't hers. It belonged to someone else. Behind the screen, Lena was living a different story. She was a broke college student, struggling to pay for textbooks and barely scraping by. The money she used to create her online persona came from borrowed funds, fake donations, and outright lies. But she needed more. The attention she garnered from her fabricated life wasn't enough. She craved power, the kind that only comes from manipulating the real world with the click of a button. Trigger point. How far would you go to build your own dream life? What's the price of online fame? Lena started to take it a step further. She began to interact with her followers on a more personal level, giving advice, sharing stories of struggles, and encouraging others to join her lifestyle through affiliate links and paid promotions. It didn't take long before she started endorsing products that she didn't actually use, selling courses on how to live the life she was pretending to have. Her followers, desperate for validation and guidance, latched on. They believed her, trusted her, and followed her advice. Lena capitalized on this growing influence, making thousands of dollars in a matter of months. She had created a world in which she was an expert on everything from wealth building to self-help, and people were buying it. However, Lena's success had a darker side. She didn't just use her platform to sell products. She also manipulated those around her. Lena began to reach out to high-profile individuals, offering to promote their businesses for a fee. She even convinced a number of them to provide her with gifts, luxury items, jewelry, vacations, all under the guise of being a brand ambassador. But it wasn't just the rich and famous who fell for Lena's charms. She also targeted everyday people. When she started a crowdfunding campaign claiming she was building a school for underprivileged children in Africa, the donations flooded in. People, believing her story, sent her thousands of dollars. They were motivated by the hope that their money would help others, but in reality, they were feeding Lena's growing empire of lies. Trigger point. How many lies is too many before they catch up with you? Could one lie cost you everything? Lena's web of deception began to unravel when one of her followers, a woman named Angela, started digging deeper into Lena's past. Angela, who had been one of Lena's most loyal supporters, began noticing inconsistencies in the stories Lena told. The luxury car Lena showed off in one photo was listed for sale in a local dealership's inventory. The private jet Lena had flown on was actually a stock photo from an online database. Angela's suspicion grew, and she began sharing her findings with others. It didn't take long for the truth to spread. Lena's past, a series of unpaid bills and college loans, was exposed online. The businesses she had promoted began to speak out, stating that they had never heard of her and that she had never followed through on any of the promises she made. But the biggest revelation came when a woman named Sarah stepped forward. Sarah was the real owner of the luxury car Lena had used to stage her photos. She revealed that Lena had borrowed the car from her with the promise of promotion, but had failed to return it. When Sarah tried to contact Lena, she was blocked, and her attempts to confront her were ignored. Sarah's post went viral, and soon, more people came forward with similar stories of being deceived and manipulated by Lena. Trigger point. What does it take to expose a liar in the age of social media? The scandal quickly gained national attention. News outlets ran stories about the fake influencer who had built an empire on lies. It wasn't just Lena's followers who were outraged. Businesses that had been misled by her manipulations began to take legal action. And as the truth came out, Lena's carefully constructed world began to crumble. Lena's online presence disappeared almost overnight. Her followers unfollowed her in droves, disgusted by the betrayal. The companies that once paid her for promotion distanced themselves, and the crowdfunding campaign that had once raised thousands of dollars was revealed to be a scam. Lena faced multiple lawsuits, both for fraud and for the emotional distress caused to those she had deceived. Yet, in a bizarre twist, Lena's story didn't end there. Despite the mounting evidence and the legal battles, there were still people who believed her. Some claimed she had been misunderstood, that she was a victim of a witch hunt orchestrated by jealous influencers and online critics. Others argued that the real issue was not Lena's actions, but the society that allowed influencers like her to thrive. Trigger point. In a world driven by social media, can we ever trust what we see online again? As the courts deliberated on her future, Lena's story became a larger commentary on the dark side of social media culture. It was a cautionary tale about the dangers of living in a world where appearances mattered more than reality, where anyone could become a star by selling a lie. But as Lena sat in court, facing charges that could land her in prison for years, one thing was clear. She had stolen more than just material wealth. She had stolen trust, the very thing that kept people coming back to her fake world. In the end, Lena was convicted of multiple counts of fraud. Her empire of lies came crashing down, but the damage had already been done. The question remained: how much longer would society tolerate the manipulation of influencers and the exploitation of people's trust? Would Lena be the last, or would there be others willing to take her place? The world was watching and waiting. As Lena's trial continued, the online world was torn. On one hand, the victims, from wealthy businessmen to everyday people who had been duped by her fabricated lifestyle, called for swift justice. On the other hand, a surprising faction of Lena's supporters began to speak up, arguing that her story was one of ambition gone wrong, rather than a calculated scheme to ruin lives. They believed she had merely played the game of social media and was caught up in a world that rewarded manipulation. They weren't wrong. After all, influencers like Lena didn't just appear from nowhere. It became apparent that Lena wasn't just a singular example of deceit. She was a product of a larger societal issue, one where authenticity was sacrificed for followers, likes, and endorsements. The rise of fake it till you make it had turned many young influencers into multi-million-dollar brands, all built on the illusion of success. The question now was whether Lena's punishment would set a precedent or be swept under the rug as just another case of bad behavior online. Trigger point. Have we created a society where lies and manipulation are the currency of success? Lena's defense team tried to argue that she was simply a victim of circumstance. They painted her as a girl from a small town, hungry for success, who got caught up in the world of social media. They claimed that Lena had never intended to harm anyone, that the luxurious photos and fake promotions were simply part of the game she had learned to play. They contended that, in today's world, everyone was trying to sell something, and Lena just happened to be selling the illusion of a perfect life. But as the prosecution laid out its case, it became clear that Lena's actions went far beyond innocent self-promotion. The sheer number of people she had manipulated, the amount of money she had taken, and the web of lies she had woven painted a much darker picture. It wasn't just the fake car or the stolen items. It was the lives she had destroyed. For months, the public had been captivated by Lena's story, but the victims' voices were now rising to the surface, louder than ever before. Sarah, the woman who had first exposed Lena's fake life, continued to speak out. Sarah had not just lost money. She had lost her own sense of trust in people. She told the court that, because of Lena, she would never see social media the same way again. She had believed in Lena's promises, invested time and energy into a relationship that wasn't real. Sarah wasn't alone. Countless others came forward with their stories, detailing how Lena had swindled them out of everything from vacation funds to personal information. Trigger point. How much of our lives are we willing to sacrifice for a moment of validation on social media? But it wasn't just the individuals who had been financially exploited. Companies and brands that had partnered with Lena now found themselves under a cloud of suspicion. Several businesses had lost substantial amounts of money after trusting Lena to promote their products. Their reputations had taken a hit, and many were now facing lawsuits themselves for having worked with her. As Lena's name became synonymous with deception, the question loomed larger. Had the companies been complicit in her crimes? Or were they merely the victims of the same fake world she had so expertly crafted? The media, eager to cover every aspect of the case, sensationalized it. Headlines screamed about the queen of fake, the influencer who lied her way to the top, and how one woman used Instagram to steal from hundreds. The coverage created an atmosphere of moral panic, questioning not just Lena's actions, but the entire influencer culture. Was the influencer industry inherently corrupt? Was there any way to distinguish the genuine from the fake? Some influencers, realizing that their careers were now under a microscope, began distancing themselves from Lena's actions. They expressed solidarity with the victims, but also used the opportunity to defend themselves. They insisted that not all influencers were like Lena, and that most of them were genuinely trying to build brands based on authenticity. It was a battle for the public's trust that was far from over, and Lena's case became the poster child for what could go wrong in the world of social media fame. But the damage had already been done. Trigger point. Can any influencer truly be trusted, or are we all playing a dangerous game of smoke and mirrors? As Lena sat in court, hearing the stories of those she had betrayed, she began to show signs of remorse. For the first time in months, she seemed to grasp the gravity of her actions. She was no longer the confident, flashy influencer who had once flaunted her perfect life. Her facade cracked, revealing a young woman who was now staring down the consequences of her lies. The gravity of the situation hit home. Her lies had not only cost people money, but they had also caused deep emotional harm. But the big question remained: was Lena truly sorry? Or was her remorse merely a product of a self-serving attempt to avoid a lengthy prison sentence? Would a few tears in court be enough to absolve her of the damage she had done? And, most importantly, could society move past the influence of the online world that had made Lena's rise and fall possible in the first place? With every passing day, the public's opinion became more polarized. Some believed Lena deserved a harsh punishment, while others believed she was just a scapegoat for a flawed system that had placed too much value on social media influencers. Either way, her story was far from over, and it would likely spark an ongoing debate about the role of influencers in our lives and the blurred line between reality and fabrication. As the trial neared its conclusion, Lena's fate hung in the balance. Would she be sent to prison, or would she be allowed to walk free, only to continue living in the shadows of her past lies? The world watched with bated breath, waiting to see how this cautionary tale would end. As Lena's sentencing day arrived, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, photographers, and even online influencers from all corners of the world had gathered, eager to see the final chapter of the scandal that had captured so many people's attention. It was more than just the end of Lena's story. It was the culmination of a larger conversation about the ethics of social media and its impact on society. The decision in Lena's case would have long-lasting effects, influencing how online personalities, brands, and followers interacted going forward. Lena stood before the judge, her once confident demeanor now replaced by a nervousness that was visible to everyone in the room. She had spent months in solitary confinement since her arrest, and during that time, she'd had plenty of time to reflect on her actions. The courtroom fell silent as the judge began to read the charges once again: fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to deceive. The weight of each accusation hung heavy in the air, and Lena's future seemed uncertain. Despite the overwhelming evidence, there was still a small contingent of people who felt sympathy for her. They argued that Lena was a victim of the culture that had made her famous. In the era of online success, they claimed, it was all too easy to be tempted by the allure of a perfect life. After all, many influencers who built their careers by fabricating details of their personal lives had become multimillionaires. They contended that Lena had simply taken the concept too far. But the victims, the ones who had suffered because of Lena's lies, were not as forgiving. Sarah, the woman who had initially uncovered Lena's fake persona, spoke again at the sentencing hearing. Her voice was steady, but her words were laced with the frustration and anger that had been building for months. She recalled how Lena's deceit had cost her everything, from money to her belief in the authenticity of people she met online. Trigger point: how many others like Sarah are out there, left broken by the lies of social media? The courtroom was divided. On one side, those who believed Lena deserved a harsh sentence, arguing that her lies had cost people not just money but their trust in the very systems that were supposed to protect them. On the other side, those who believed that Lena was simply a product of a system gone wrong, one that rewarded deceit and manipulation. Some even went so far as to suggest that the true villains were the social media platforms that had allowed such behavior to flourish. But the most chilling testimony came from one of Lena's former friends, an influencer named Zoe. She had been one of the people who had helped Lena build her online empire, not knowing the full extent of the lies she was telling. Zoe told the court about how Lena had fabricated everything, from her expensive vacations to her relationships with wealthy businessmen. She described how Lena had stolen content from others, creating fake personas that appeared to be real. Zoe admitted that, in the beginning, she had thought Lena was simply playing the game, but as she learned more, she realized the extent of the manipulation. She didn't just lie to her followers, Zoe said in a tearful voice. She lied to all of us. She used us to build her empire, and when the truth came out, we were all left holding the pieces. Trigger point. How far are we willing to go to maintain our image in a world where everyone is constantly watching? As the trial dragged on, the defense's strategy began to change. They had initially focused on claiming that Lena was simply misunderstood, a young woman caught up in a system she couldn't control. But now, they attempted to shift the narrative entirely. They argued that Lena had suffered from deep-rooted psychological issues that made her crave validation to the point where she'd been willing to destroy everything for it. The prosecution wasn't buying it. They pointed out that this wasn't a case of someone suffering from mental illness or addiction. This was a calculated decision to deceive, manipulate, and profit off the vulnerabilities of others. They reminded the court that Lena had shown no remorse for her actions until the moment when it became clear she would face consequences. It was only then that she started to act sorry, and even then, her apologies felt rehearsed, too little, and far too late. Finally, after months of legal drama, the judge issued her verdict. Lena was sentenced to 12 years in prison, her influence in the social media world officially over. The courtroom reacted in a wave of conflicting emotions. Some applauded the sentence, while others seemed resigned to the fact that Lena's actions were a reflection of a larger societal problem. But the real question remained: what would happen next? With Lena's case behind them, people began to look closer at the world of social media influencers. How many others were out there fabricating their lives for personal gain? How many were exploiting the trust of their followers without consequences? And how many people, like Sarah, were left to pick up the pieces of their broken trust? Trigger point. If we continue to turn a blind eye to the lies behind the perfect Instagram posts, how many more will be hurt by those who only care about their own success? As Lena was escorted out of the courtroom in handcuffs, the public was left to grapple with the aftermath. Many realized that Lena's trial was not just about one woman's crime. It was about a systemic issue that could no longer be ignored. It was a wake-up call for the digital age, a reminder that behind every perfectly curated post, there might be a lie, a scam, or a scam artist waiting to manipulate. But as Lena's story faded from the headlines, the problem was far from solved. If anything, it was only just beginning. The rise of influencers had become a powerful force, and with it came an ever-growing demand for authenticity, transparency, and accountability. The question was no longer whether Lena would be remembered as a fraud, but whether we, as a society, were ready to confront the dark side of social media before it was too late. Do you think Lena's prison sentence is enough to deter others from following her path? What are your thoughts on the rise of influencers and the impact of social media on the lives of everyday people? Let us know in the comments below.